The Battle of Hong Kong. The year was 1941, and the world was embroiled in a global conflict that would change the course of history. In the midst of this turmoil, the Battle of Hong Kong played out on a small but significant scale. The battle was a key moment in the Pacific theatre of World War II, pitting Allied forces against the formidable Imperial Japanese Army. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the Battle of Hong Kong and how it shaped the world. Hello everyone, and welcome to History Declassified. Don't forget to hit the like button, and please subscribe to my channel to ensure you never miss an update on all the fascinating facts related to war in the Pacific we'll be covering. Let's get to it. The Battle of Hong Kong was a dramatic and tragic event that took place in the Pacific theatre of World War II in December 1941. But the story of this battle begins long before that, with tensions brewing between Britain and Japan. The end of the Anglo-Japanese alliance in 1921 marked a turning point, and as the Second Sino-Japanese War escalated in the 1930s, Britain became increasingly concerned about Japan's ambitions in the region. By October 1938, the Japanese had occupied Canton, and Hong Kong was surrounded. The British knew that defending Hong Kong would be a monumental task, but improvements were made to the defences, including along the gin drinkers line. Despite the perceived difficulties, the British initially planned to reduce the garrison to a symbolic size, but they later reversed their decision and sent additional reinforcements to Hong Kong. The plan for the defence of Hong Kong was to fight a delaying action in the new Territories and Kowloon Peninsula, allowing vital infrastructure and stores to be destroyed. The gin drinkers line was expected to hold out for at least 3 weeks, after which all defenders would withdraw to Hong Kong Island, which would be defended while the use of the harbour was denied until reinforcements arrived from Singapore or the Philippines. Unfortunately, the British military in Hong Kong grossly underestimated the capabilities of the Japanese forces and downplayed assessments that the Japanese posed a serious threat. US Consul Robert Ward, who was the highest-ranking US official posted to Hong Kong in the period preceding the outbreak of hostilities, pointed out that the local British community had not adequately prepared itself or the Chinese populace for war. He also highlighted prejudiced attitudes held by those governing the Crown Colony of Hong Kong, some of whom expressed a preference to surrender to the Japanese rather than employ Chinese to defend the colony. New Territories and Kowloon. On December the 8th, the Japanese launched a surprise invasion of Hong Kong, catching the defending forces off guard. The 2nd Battalion, Royal Scots, held the west, while the 214th Punjab stood firm in the centre, and the 57th Rajput guarded the eastern front. The engineers destroyed bridges on the likely invasion routes to slow the enemy's advance. At the crack of dawn, the Japanese began their attack by crossing the Shamchun River with 3 regiments, the 230th, the 229th, and 228th, aiming to take control of Yuen Long, Castle Peak Bay, Tai Mo Shan, Chek Nai Ping, Tide Cove, Tai Shui Hang, Lam Tsuen, Needle Hill, and more. To add insult to injury, at 8 AM, the Japanese bombed Kai Tak Airport, destroying several civil aircraft and 2/3 of the Hong Kong Volunteer Defence Corps air unit, including the iconic Pan Am Airways flying boat Hong Kong Clipper. The RAF and air unit personnel joined the ground troops to fight on, showing their indomitable spirit. The first major clash happened at 3 PM, when the 214th Punjab engaged the IJA, taking down several platoons at 6:30 PM, just south of Tai Po. The HKVDC's armoured cars and Bren gun carriers also joined in, and successfully fought against the Japanese forces. Despite these wins, the 214th Punjab withdrew to Grassy Hill in the afternoon to avoid being outflanked. Later that night, all units were ordered to retreat to the gin drinkers line. On December the 9th, the 2nd Royal Scots held the west. A reserve company of the 57th Rajputs moved forward to Smuggler's Ridge. The HKVDC defended Pho Tan, and the 214th Punjab stood their ground at Tide Cove. But the IJA's 228th Regiment, led by the fearless Colonel Doi, reached Needle Hill and reconnoitred the Shing Mun Redoubt area of the gin drinkers line. To his surprise, the defenders were unprepared for an attack, even though they were outside his regimental boundary. Colonel Doi quickly formulated a plan and began moving his men into position. The redoubt was defended by A Company, 2nd Royal Scots, supported by other units with a total of 3 officers and 39 soldiers. The defenders and the nearby D Company, 57th Rajputs, patrolled the area but failed to detect the 2 IJA battalions or the 150-man attacking force, which had crossed the Jubilee Dam and was positioned just below one of the redoubt's pillboxes. At 11 p.m, the defenders detected movement and opened fire as the IJA launched their attack. As the Japanese progressively overran the complex of trenches and tunnels, many defenders found themselves locked in the redoubt's artillery observation post, OP. Pillpox 402 was destroyed by IJA sappers at 2:30 a.m. on the 10th, and the rest of the 3 228th Regiment joined the assault, moving through the redoubt and into the valley, where they ran into the 5 7th Rajputs, who were moving to support the redoubt. Hong Kong Island. During the war, the defence of Hong Kong Island was split into 2 brigades, East and West. The West Brigade, led by the brave Brigadier John K. Lawson, had their headquarters strategically placed at the top of Wong Nai Chung Gap. Their forces included the fierce 214th Punjab, the resilient Winnipeg Grenadiers, the valiant Middlesex Regiment, the indomitable 2nd Royal Scots, and the ever-ready HKVDC. The East Brigade, commanded by Brigadier Cedric Wallace, had their base at Tai Tam Gap, with their forces including the 5 7th Rajputs, the Royal Rifles of Canada, and the dependable HKVDC. As the war escalated, on the 13th of December in 1941, a Japanese delegation came across the harbour to offer terms of surrender. However, these terms were bravely rejected by the defenders of the island. The Japanese responded with an artillery bombardment that disabled one of the 9.2-inch guns on Mount Davis and hit Belcher's fort in Pok Fu Lam. They also launched air attacks, causing significant damage to defensive positions. Despite all these changes, the defenders stood firm and rejected another offer of surrender on the 17th of December. The Japanese had moved their forces closer to the island and their presence loomed large, with the 23rd Army headquarters at Tai Po and the 38th Division near Kai Tak. Fast forward to the 22nd of December, the tranquility of the island of Hong Kong was shattered by a surprise attack from the Japanese forces, which came from various points. The Allied forces, including the 229th Battalion, were caught off guard and struggled to defend themselves against the relentless onslaught. The East Brigade quickly formed 3 defensive lines, hoping to hold the enemy back. However, the Japanese were able to break through, forcing the defenders to abandon their positions and retreat towards the west. The battle was intense, with both sides exchanging heavy fire, causing destruction and chaos all around. As the days went on, the defenders were running out of supplies and morale was low. The Royal Rifles, who had been holding the line, were eventually withdrawn to the safety of Stanley. However, the Japanese weren't content to stop there and continued their assault, determined to take control of the island. On the 24th of December, the Japanese launched a ferocious attack on the Allied forces but were initially repulsed. However, their persistence paid off, and they broke through the 2nd defence line, committing the St. Stephen's College massacre. The situation became dire as the remnants of the 5 7th Rajputs were pushed back to the north shore, while the 230th Regiment advanced through Wang Kai, meeting fierce resistance at the China Fleet Club, but ultimately succeeding. The battle raged on for days, with both sides fighting fiercely. However, on the 25th of December, the British forces finally surrendered, marking the end of the Battle of Hong Kong. The fall of Hong Kong was a significant turning point in the Pacific War and led to the internment of thousands of Allied soldiers and civilians. The fall of Hong Kong. As British morning dawned on the occupied island of Hong Kong, Governor Mark Aitchison Young made the fateful decision to surrender to the invading Japanese forces. Despite initial resistance by some, including Major General Christopher Maltby, it was clear that further defiance would be futile. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Commander T.B. Chan and a small group of men were determined to escape the clutches of the enemy. Chan was given command of 5 remaining MTBs and along with 60 other men successfully made their way to Mers Bay where they made contact with nationalist guerrillas. Eventually, they were escorted to Huizhou, and for this incredible feat of bravery, Chan was later awarded the honorary title of Knight Commander of the Order of the British Empire. Despite the valiant efforts of many, by the afternoon of December the 25th, 1941, the surrender was official. Governor Young and General Maltby personally surrendered to General Sakai at the Japanese headquarters located on the 3rd floor of the Peninsula Hotel. However, pockets of resistance remained, including at Stanley, where Commander J.M. Wallace refused to surrender without a written order. It wasn't until 2:30 on the 26th that he received the order and surrendered. Some isolated pockets held out even longer, and it wasn't until December 27th that the Central Ordnance Munitions Depot known as Little Hong Kong finally surrendered. This surrender marked the first time in history the British Crown colony had fallen to an invading force, and the day became known as Black Christmas in Hong Kong. The brave defenders of the island had held out for 17 days, but in the end they were forced to lay down their arms and surrender to the enemy. Aftermath. At the end of the battle, both the Japanese and Allied forces experienced significant losses. The Japanese reported 675 dead and 2,079 wounded, while other estimates suggested up to 6,000 casualties. The Allied forces reported 1,111 dead, 1,167 missing, and 1,362 wounded. Among the Allied forces, the Indian troops suffered the most, with 1,164 casualties out of 3,893 military personnel. The battle was not without its share of atrocities committed by the Japanese soldiers, with some of the dead being murdered during or after surrender. The Silesian mission near Saoki 1 was overrun, and 1,528 soldiers, mostly from the Commonwealth, primarily Canadians and Indians, were buried or commemorated there. Other Allied combatants who died in the region during the war, including some Dutch sailors, were also buried in Hong Kong after the war. The 57th Rajput Regiment bore the brunt of the losses, with 156 killed, 113 missing, and 193 wounded. Meanwhile, the Japanese also suffered losses and casualties, with estimates ranging from 1,895 dead to 6,000 overall. By the end of February 1942, the Japanese government reported that they held 10,947 prisoners of war, including 5,072 British, 1,689 Canadian, 3,829 Indian, and 357 others. The Battle of Hong Kong remains a somber reminder of the horrors of war and the sacrifices made by those who fought for their countries. Thank you for watching our video. Don't forget to subscribe to History Declassified to watch as we investigate more historical events of the finest hours of the Second World War.